He ended up 34. I'm not as high on him this week as you, Matthew. That's like Snoop Dogg high. But I did move him up to shout out to Snoop Dogg.
Tom Hardy, Baby Wake Ups,
I do have him at running back 21.
High as Snoop Dogg, high as my cholesterol. Like, you know, it's
There's
like
a lot
whatever.
of jokes to be had there.
It's really, right. Just, there's a lot of different ways you can go with it.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. It is Love-Hate Day for week number 3 on the NFL season. I'm Connor Rogers alongside the very excited Matthew Berry and Jay Croucher.
Listen,
Consider
representing the Magpies and Macho Man Savage, Randy Macho Man Savage. I dig it.
A lot of versatility on this test.
Yeah, I'm fairly generic, but like, hey.
You're very lunch pail today.
I'm very lunch
business.
pail, just like my buddy Snoop Dogg. The dog drinks for free.
That's right.
He drinks for free today. He drinks for free every day.
The dog father.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. We love Snoop. This is a pro Snoop table.
Absolutely.
Just so you know.
Listen,
absolutely.
We got a lot to get through today.
Did you ever answer that question, Jay? I asked it to you yesterday, and then I felt like we moved on. But how do you keep your pimp hand strong?
Yeah, it's a great question, Matthew. I still haven't devised an answer for it. Yeah.
Little warning.
I gave you 24 hours, and you still haven't come up with a good answer?
You're gonna need
another 24 days.
You got to keep them in line. Keep everyone in line is what you got to do.
Okay.
So, yeah, exactly.
All right.
Dear.
Well, so how about some Rotoworld Player news then?
You know what I like to do? I like to ask questions that make Connor and Jay awkward. They don't know where should I go?
Yes.
Should I actually answer this?
I know where the line.
streets.
I know where the line is, and I feel like Barry has gone over the line.
Yes.
And I for one am much younger than Matthew. I have families to provide for. I have fiancés to provide for.
Absolutely.
Dogs to
100%.
provide for.
Yep.
Matthew can just, what does he care? He's
When
he's out there living on borrowed time anyway.
That's
When
a
you
good
ask
way of
those
framing it.
questions, it's like a dimly lit kind of array of streets, and I don't know the way to get home in the darkness.
And there might not be a way home, to be honest with you.
That's
Listen,
correct.
they say a lot of things about you, Barry, but you do know where the line is.
I do. I just like to step
You're
over
incredibly talented at stepping just
just over it.
That's
That's actually correct. All right, listen. Let's get on track here. Connor,
I
stop
know.
talking.
Jalen
I got
Waddle
us
got
off
knocked
the
out.
rails again. What do you know? Listen, here's the injuries we're tracking right now. Jalen Waddle did not practice. He is dealing with that head injury from the illegal hit that he took against New England. A couple other ones here. I think this is a little bit of a surprise. Bryce Young has now not practiced 2 days in a row. Andy Dalton's the backup, so maybe no Bryce Young this week, Barry.
Yeah, and not that Bryce Young is fantasy relevant, but this is Thursday morning. It just came out just before we came on air that Bryce Young once again was not practicing for the Carolina Panthers, and that suddenly becomes interesting because they're on the road at Seattle, and I'd have more confidence in the Carolina pass catchers if Andy Dalton was under center. 100%. I mean, again, we love the long-term upside of Bryce Young. I'm on my way to Alabama after the show for its Parents' Weekend. So, listen, roll tide. I'm not saying anything. I'm absolutely not saying anything bad about Bryce Young. I love Bryce Young. But, Andy Dalton's a professional quarterback. The Seahawks are the third worst pass defense through the first 2 weeks of the season. And so you might have more confidence in an Adam Thielen, in a Hayden Hurst, even a Jonathan Mingo, or the run game if Dalton was under center. I think that's an interesting one to track.
Anthony Richardson also still in concussion protocol. We could see more of Gardner Minshew. One injury you don't see here is, of course, Austin Ekeler, who we've talked about on this show this week, because Ekeler is not day-to-day or week-to-week. We don't have a timetable on him. But how about hear from the man himself on the ankle injury that he's dealing with?
Yeah, dealing with the ankle, and I've dealt with ankles in the past. You just got to get it to a point where you feel good, where it's taped up, and you can actually feel like, okay, if I get tackled, it's not going to be re-aggravated and set me back to where I was before, where I could barely walk on it. It's nothing that's going to be like he's out for, several months type of thing. It's a day-to-day, week-to-week type of situation. I like the progress that I've made so far, so hopefully back sooner than later.
Later in that same interview, by the way, he said, listen, I get it. I know fantasy managers want me out there. I have myself on one of my teams, so I need me out there
He's
too.
one of us. That's very
He
nice.
is absolutely one of us. It's awesome that he is so forthright, but it doesn't sound good that he's going to be out there this weekend. against the Minnesota Vikings.
All right, so for Thursday Night Football, you see the injury report. Of course,
and if Josh Kelly goes, Josh Kelly would be a top 20 start against the Vikes.
If you're watching here on Peacock or on YouTube, you see the notable injury report for Thursday Night Football. Saquon Barkley now has been ruled out. Nice try, Brian Dable. Nobody fell for that. Wan'Dale Robinson could make his return from the knee injury. The big one we're tracking here, Jay, Brandon Aiyuk. If we get an update during the show, we obviously will give it to you. But Aiyuk is he's playing through a shoulder injury. We don't know if he's going to play tonight on the short week.
Didn't look good against the Rams. He looked like he was in real discomfort. And guess what? They can beat the Giants without Brandon Aiyuk tonight. So I wonder if they skew to the side of caution. Maybe even if he does play, it's not a full complement of snaps. Just quickly on Ekeler. Did he imply that he couldn't walk on the ankle previously?
Yes.
Which isn't great.
No.
And also the fact that he threw in week to week as well, so possible timeline. So I don't think he's going to play this week, I would guess.
I don't have a lot of confidence that he goes against the Vikings. As somebody who has Brandon Aiyuk in a 16-team guillotine league, I mean, like, it's dicey. I need Brandon Aiyuk. I am praying to the fantasy gods, please, Brandon Aiyuk. I just need like 3 catches and a touchdown. Can I get that tonight? And then you can take the second half off or something like that.
That actually scenario is not out of the range, by the way. That he plays the first half and then it's like, and we're okay here.
I will say this: just we're gonna do a game preview later, and check that out on YouTube if it's not part of this show. But what I will say is, if Brandon Aiyuk is active, I'm starting him. Even if he's questionable, because all he needs is one play. He's that type of guy. It's that type of offense. They're double-digit favorites against the Giants. So if Aiyuk is active, I'm starting him.
One bit of news here away from injuries, but of course a team that needs help in the backfield. The Vikings acquire Cam Akers from the Rams for a swap of, wait for it, 2026 draft picks. Day 3 2026 draft picks.
Dude. Yeah, I mean, like.
How do you think that call went down, by the way?
Hey,
hard negotiating.
Yeah, I mean, what do you want? Like,
Can we have a punnet of blueberries as well in the package? It's, I think, obviously you can't just trade someone for nothing, right? So you have to fulfill that element of the trade logistically. But yeah, I mean, it seemed like he was going to get cut regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, first off, the Rams absolutely killed his trade value. Like, he's a healthy scratch. We hate him again. We hated him last year. Seemed like we'd made up, but now we've hated him again. So the fact that they are able to get anything for this guy and basically get his salary off their books, I think is a win for the Rams because they were clearly done with Cam Akers. As for the Minnesota Vikings, understand that you've got Kevin O'Connell and you've got Wes Phillips, the head coach and the offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings. They came from the Rams and Sean McVay. So they're familiar with Cam Akers. Cam Akers played under those two guys. So it's a known quantity of what they're getting, which I think is exciting for O'Connell and Wes Phillips. It's also, like, for Cam Akers, like, not a big learning curve. They're running basically the same offense in Minnesota. So he should be able to get up to speed quickly. And let's face it, for all the fireworks and explosiveness that the Vikings offense has put up, they're 0-2 and they haven't run the ball this year. They just have been really ineffective running the ball. Alexander Madison's gotten a ton of volume, but just no production. And so maybe they're like, either we don't think Madison can be the guy, or hey, we're giving Madison, like, listen, you weren't worried about Ty Chandler, worry about this guy, because this guy has been a productive lead running back in the NFL. I mean, again, over the final 6 games of last year, Cam Akers was a top 5 fantasy running back. He had over 100 yards from scrimmage. He averaged that over those final 6 games. So, I mean, again, it's not just fantasy stats. Like, he has legitimately been a productive NFL starting running back. And so maybe, I don't know. It's just, I think here, in general, if you're starting a Vikings running back this week, it's Alexander Madison. Cam Akers just got there. He'll probably get a handful of touches, right? And it's a matchup that doesn't scare you that much against the Chargers. They're middle of the pack against the run so far this year. But if I was an Alexander Madison manager, I'm nervous. I'm already nervous the first 2 weeks, and this is not helping. And I think if you're a Cam Akers manager, this is the best case scenario because he wasn't getting on the field in L.A., and now he's gone to a situation where he's got a shot. He's got a legitimate shot at significant playing time with coaches that know him, that understand his personality and went to trade for him.
How about if you're a Kyren Williams manager right now?
You're loving life.
Looking good.
Yeah, looking good. Right?
Guy who basically went undrafted in drafts is all of a sudden looking like a top 20 running back, certainly the rest of the way.
He may come up later in the show, FYI, but I have him as a top 10 play this week, Kyren Williams.
With Madison, I mean, game script killed him against the Eagles. They were just down so much straight away, but he didn't look great in either game. He looks kind of Najee Harris-esque, just kind of running in mud at the moment. And the thing with Akers, I tweeted this out a few nights ago, but it's weird how Akers and Rashad Penny, they only have two modes. It's like close to the best running back in the league or close to getting cut. And so Akers has a lot of upside, and if Madison isn't good against a vulnerable Chargers defense, then I'd be very worried.
All right, let's get into love-hate, and of course we start with the running backs for Week 3. And yes, we will get to Kyren Williams in just a second, but before we do here, Barry, Travis Etienne going up against the Texans, he tops the list. There was some fear over the summer. What is Tank Bigsby going to do in this offense, and how is they going to affect Etienne? But you love Etienne going into Week 3 with this matchup.
Well, I love the match. Speaking of the matches with Houston, I love a matchup with Houston. I mean, through the first 2 weeks of the season, Texans have allowed 4 rushing touchdowns to running back. No team in the NFL has allowed more than Houston. 79% of the team's running back touches so far have gone to Travis Etienne. He's actually run more than 25 routes in both games. He actually only had 3 such games, so they're trying to get him more involved in the passing game. Yes, Tank Bigsby did take the touchdown in game 1, but still, 110 scrimmage yards both games against the Texans last year. I think he does it again. I have Etienne as a top 10 play this week.
Yep, you love the matchup, and I think there was concern, certainly, that Tank Bigsby was going to eat into his workload. Not so far, not really. Some goal line stuff, yes, but for the most part, Etienne is getting on 80% of the carries, and he's clearly the guy, and this is about as good of a matchup as you can have.
Jay, let's revisit Kyren Williams because of the matchup. He is at Cincinnati. I know we are still kind of wondering the status of the Cincinnati team with Joe Burrow, but, you know, when you look at Kyren Williams, he's had an impact in the pass game, but he's also gotten a lot of work in the run game, and I think the biggest surprise offense of the fantasy season through 2 weeks so far.
Absolutely, and I think it's largely, look, Puka Nacua is an incredible story, but I think almost the biggest story in terms of the outlook of the rest of the season is that Matthew Stafford looks like a top 7, top 8 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, this was a guy 2 years ago who was in the MVP discussion early in the season, who won the Super Bowl, who was almost Super Bowl MVP, and he looks like he's back to being that caliber of player, and the entire offense is benefiting. And the fact that they were able to move the ball on San Francisco with like relative ease, San Francisco couldn't get off the field for the first 3 quarters. So I think Kyren Williams, it's such a vote of confidence as well from an organizational perspective that they were ready to just move on from Cam Akers after 2 weeks because they believe in Kyren Williams.
Yeah, and by the way, Zach Evans becomes kind of an interesting stash if you're just looking to grab somebody to back him up. But Kyren Williams is going to get a massive workload in this 95% rate in week number 2. Cincinnati, it's not a bad matchup against the Bengals. They've allowed the 5th most rushing yards to running backs through the first 2 weeks of the season. I have Kyren Williams at running back 6 this week.
Wow.
I mean, I know, that's the world we live in, right? Puka Nacua is the
Roll
thing.
Tide.
Kyren Williams, roll tide. Let's go. Dogs are playing with cats. You know, it's all sorts of chaos. Yeah, Kyren Williams, man. Look at that. Look at the stat on your screen. Only Tony Pollard has more touches in the red zone this season than Kyren Williams, who again was literally left for dead in drafts. No one took him at all. He also, by the way, has a 13.5% target share this season. He's 3rd on the team, so he's being involved in all 3 facets of the game. Well, not on, all 3 downs, I should say. Not 3. He's not playing special teams. He's not playing defense. It's a Thursday. I was up late writing the Love Hate article, which should be up very soon on NBCSports.com, Rotoworld.com. I'm a company man. Kyren Williams, running back 6 for me this week.
Some are saying you slept at NBC to finish the article.
Some are saying.
Like a head coach
some
in
are
the NFL
saying,
says the
very
facility.
much so. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, under the booth at the cafeteria.
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly. Just
strange place to choose where to sleep at NBC. Just quickly, go trade for Tony
But
Pollard.
when I had to use the bathroom, it was your office.
Just
so you know. Just so you know. Don't you worry. Right. Is there not a bathroom in there?
Jay's.
Oh, yeah.
Oops.
Oops. All right. Well, then whatever. I still used it. I just Jay won't mind.
Okay. What was I saying? Go trade for Tony Pollard because he's got 19 touches in the red zone already, and he's not getting the production yet, but it's coming, and he's going to be a top 5 running back on the season.
Obviously, no doubt.
All right, our next one comes with a little caveat. Jahmyr Gibbs makes the love list going against the Falcons. This kind of comes in feeling that David Montgomery won't play in this game. David Montgomery did not practice Wednesday. We know he said it's going to take he's week to week to get healthy. His coach kind of calling it day to day. We'll see with David Montgomery. But Barry, Jahmyr Gibbs against Atlanta. We know there'll be some Craig Reynolds in this game. but it feels like more for Gibbs.
And that's what I wrote in the article. I said there's going to actually be more Craig Reynolds in this game than I think Jahmyr Gibbs managers are expecting or would like. But still, it should be the Jahmyr Gibbs show. He played on 71% of the snaps once Montgomery left the game last week, including 100% on 3rd and 4th down. He also got the only carry inside the 10-yard line. His target share last week, 26.5%. He was actually targeted on 43% of his routes, so almost half of his routes he got a target as well. Remember, the Lions averaging over 32 running back touches per game through the first 2 weeks, and so playing the Atlanta Falcons, which is not a team that scares you. They're a bottom 10 run defense through the first 2 weeks of the season. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, and again, this game is indoors on the turf in Detroit. Gibbs should be able to break 1 or 2. I actually have him as a top 10 play, and if Montgomery is suddenly active, again, because we're still following the situation, he's still a top 20 play. Patience, Jahmyr Gibbs managers, because your day is coming, and that day is this Sunday.
Yeah, suspect he might want to upstage Bijan Robinson as well in the matchup of number 1 first-round running backs. Total there is 46.
From the SEC.
Yeah, from the SEC.
A little SEC rivalry right there.
Roll Tide again.
I'm sorry. No, I take that back. No, Bijan was Texas, but
close enough.
Iowa State.
Can I tell
Roll
you?
South.
Here's literally what happened in my mind. Because last week, Bijan played Carolina, and there was a shot after the game of Bijan and Bryce Young, Texas and Alabama, the night after Texas beat Alabama. And so, I did an SEC comment on the Sunday show, and so that I...
Good internal look at how your synapses
and so Bijan, and then I was thinking, Georgia, Atlanta, and Georgia, and
then you thought about diet soda,
and I was just like, I probably should have used some deodorizer in your office last night, and it's all a mishmash in there, and that all happened within a nanosecond. So just taking you through my psychosis, and just understand that just be thankful, because you at any point can turn this off. They're contractually required to deal with this an hour every single day.
6 days a week. Yeah.
6 days. Oh, and for Jay, it's 6 days a week.
Yeah, for me, it's 5. I actually thought about this.
Yeah.
Unlike Jay.
Yeah, God bless SNY for keeping you away.
Yes,
Zach Wilson.
That's true.
That's a good point. What is the worst punishment?
That's a fair point. What is the balance there?
Matthew Berry at 9 a.m. on Sunday, or Zach Wilson in primetime? Either way.
Right. Neither is ideal.
All right, a couple others receiving votes here. Isiah Pacheco going up against the Bears, which that defense is a fantasy fiesta, it feels like. Raheem Mostert against the Broncos, as Jeff Wilson's still on IR. Zach Moss going up against the Ravens. Zach Moss coming off a really, really big week. That backfield is his. And then Jaylen Warren against the Raiders right now. That Raiders defense not looking so good, Barry. Jaylen Warren looking like the more explosive runner in that Steelers backfield.
By the way, Raiders have allowed the second most running back receptions through 2 weeks. Second most targets on the team through 2 weeks for Jaylen Warren. Again, no Deontay Johnson in a game that should be high scoring at Las Vegas on Sunday Night Football right here on NBC and Peacock. I'm a company man. Zach Moss, 98% of the snaps last week, whether Richardson or Minshew, he's going to get a ton of work here. We like that. We just saw what Brian Robinson did to the Broncos, and now Raheem Mostert on a much better offense. My Commanders have a good offense. The Dolphins have an awesome offense. And so him, and then Pacheco, it's just worth thing. 2 games this year, the Bears have allowed over 20 fantasy points. They've given up a running back rushing touchdown in both games. Pacheco saw 88% of the team's running back carries in week 2. Again, he's now fully healthy. They've moved on from CEH. They want to save Jerick McKinnon for the end of the season. So it's going to be mostly Isiah Pacheco against the Bears. Worth noting, of course, the Chiefs are 12.5-point favorites, so you could see some running in the second half as well.
I would suspect so. And just quickly on Mostert, there's a chance that Jalen Waddle doesn't play. Tyreek Hill's on the injury report with an ankle, which seems like it's a little bit of a concern because he's dealing with the ankle at the end of last season, so don't want to see him banged up. But there is a chance that no Jalen Waddle, Patrick Surtain on Tyreek Hill, and we saw what happened against the Patriots where Christian Gonzalez largely shut down Tyreek Hill, and all of a sudden they might be running the ball a ton, and to your point, Brian Robinson had success.
Right, running a ball a ton, or by the way, maybe some Durham Smythe, maybe some River Craycraft.
You just like saying his
Braxton
name.
Berrios. All the stars are coming out of Miami this weekend, no doubt. But anyway, I like the Dolphins, and I like the Dolphins to cover.
River Craycraft.
Yeah.
Let's move over to the hate list.
River Craycraft.
This is a tough one. We start with Dameon Pierce against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Dameon Pierce, it has not been a good start to the season for him. He's played less than 50% of the snaps. He's averaging less than 3 yards per carry. They're missing 3 to 4 starters on that offensive line, Jay, which is not helping. They're playing a rookie quarterback who's had his ups and downs, plenty of ups. But for Pierce, nothing's going in the right direction.
It's not. And look, this is just unviable. Like, he's got no chance. Maybe this one a little bit, but these other ones, he's just getting tackled straight away. CJ Stroud as well, just under immense pressure already. And I just don't think, until they get these guys back, we'll see what happens with Laramie Tunsil. Titus Howard's on the IR. He won't be back till week 5 at earliest. Until that point, I just don't think that any running back on Houston is going to be viable, Matthew.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I can't believe you guys forced me to put him on my preseason love list. I didn't want to, but I'm trying to be a good teammate, and both Jay and Connor were like, oh my God, please, please, please. It's our only ask.
We won't do the show.
We won't do the show unless you put it on. And I'm like, fine. I don't believe in this guy at all, but because you guys have so bagged, I will go on a limb and promote this guy.
I will say this.
Look, right now it's not looking one of my best calls. Like I was all in on Dameon Pierce in the preseason.
Tunsil will be back. Howard will be back.
Yeah.
Stroud is good. Stroud has been good so far. That offense is going to get better. And Pierce, if he's alive, if he survives these next couple of weeks, he'll get good at some point.
And their schedule gets easier. Like it's been some tough run matchups as well as. But yes, he's barely inside my top 30. Jacksonville has allowed the 4th fewest rushing yards to running back through 2 games. They're giving up just 3.1 yards per carry. We've talked about that. And by the way, because they've gotten so down, he's played on less than 50% of the snaps through 2 weeks, which has been somewhat surprising as well. You see it on your screen. The Swaguars have been very good defensively against running backs so far in this young season.
This is how bad it is with Dameon Pierce, is that I've got him in a league where I quickly thought, do I start Zach Ertz in my flex over Dameon Pierce? Like, I don't think I'm going to, but it was like a thing.
Like the fact that it's a conversation.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's
Zach Ertz.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not great.
Our next one was the darling of the waiver wire, and that was Jerome Ford. Plenty of people probably spent a lot of fab budget this week to acquire Jerome Ford. The problem for Jerome Ford is that he goes up against the Titans this week, Barry. In Tennessee right now, nobody is running on Tennessee.
No, they've allowed 2.6 yards per carry to running back so far this season. Here's the running back finishes against the Titans. As you see it there on your screen, fewest running back yards allowed per carry this year. Here's the running back finishes against the Titans this year. Week 1, Jamal Williams, running back 38. Week 2, Josh Kelly, another free agent, a waiver wire darling that everyone started in week 2, running back 51. And so here comes Jerome Ford, who's my running back 25 this week. I might be too high on him at running back 25. The argument there is that Deshaun Watson looks awful, and maybe volume and passing game involvement with Jerome Ford, who's a really nice pass catcher. So that's the only way that I see him getting to a top 25 finish here, is that hopefully Watson, Amari Cooper may not be 100%. He got a little bit, he was banged up going into Monday night, didn't feel like he got fully healthy there. So could they dump it off to Jerome Ford? But the fact that Kareem Hunt is in the building, I don't think Kareem Hunt's any good. We talked about this yesterday, but he knows the system. He's back in the building. So even if he gets 5 touches in this game, again, because the only way Ford likely gets there is either with a home run ball or through just sheer volume. And I'm nervous about that. I took yesterday when we were doing our best bets on that game, I took the under on 39.5, right? And I mean, it's been bet down on DraftKings as well. So doesn't look like there's going to be a ton of offense in that game.
No, and the issue as well is that if Ford's path to success is catching the ball out of the backfield, well, that's kind of what Kareem Hunt does as well. So that would be the one kind of part where Kareem Hunt could have success. But Connor, I mean, Ford does have home run potential, right?
That's what you're hoping for, is the big play. And he's capable of doing it on any touch. He's got great speed. He's a home run hitter. It's an offense they want to run a lot of stretch plays to get him off the tackle. So if you're starting him, you can be salvaged by just one big play.
Yep.
That's what you're hoping for.
Which is a good
And that's
feeling.
exactly what he did against the Steelers. I think it was like 15 for 37 outside of the 69, 70-yard run.
Right, that's kind of the Jerome Ford experience. Our last running back on the hate list here, Khalil Herbert against the Chiefs right now. Barry, he's just not getting the volume, Khalil Herbert, and they love Roschon Johnson.
Yeah, single-digit carries in both games so far this year for Khalil Herbert. He's played in only 37% of the snaps when Chicago has been trailing by 7 or more points this season. That's significant given the Chiefs are 12.5-point favorites. There's been a lot of news in Chicago. Justin Fields throwing his coaches under the bus, backing it off, lots of, but luckily Chicago is a very rational and calm sports town that isn't at all panicking over their franchise quarterback being 0-2 and, throwing their coaches under the bus. There's literally, I think sports talk is mostly just talking about the Blackhawks season. They're really excited about it these
Bedard,
days.
yeah. Listen, he threw the coaches under the bus, then did a second presser at his locker where he said, no, not the coaches, I'm throwing the media under the bus for taking me out of context. So,
Got it.
A real banner day in Chicago.
So he's making friends left and right. The fact is the offense is a mess.
Yep.
The offense is the mess, is absolutely a mess. The Chiefs have actually been the third best scoring defense so far this season. I mean, they shut down Jacksonville pretty well. Jacksonville got a little bit unlucky, but make no mistake, like this game's in Arrowhead, a very tough place to play. The Bears offense feels like a mess. They do love Roschon Johnson. We expect the Bears to be down. Khalil Herbert hasn't been involved in the passing game here. No, thank you. Khalil Herbert well outside my top 30.
Well, take that, Khalil Herbert.
We weren't ready for that
also,
yeah, go ahead.
The other thing is Dan Graziano, who we saw on our night in Buffalo, if you recall. Yeah, not, in the shower, but at the Wings place.
Dan Graziano got involved in this?
Well, Dan Graziano's a good buddy. Dan Graziano's a good buddy of mine from ESPN. He's an awesome human being. Yeah. We saw him we hung out with him at the Wing Bar before you and I went on our own way.
Yes.
For our magical one night in Buffalo. Yeah. And anyway, what about Dan?
He said, don't be surprised to see Roschon Johnson emerge as the primary back in Chicago. So we don't know when that's going to be, but it feels kind of inevitable. It's headed that way.
As someone who's worked a lot with Dan Graziano and knows for a fact that he has two very hardcore fantasy football teams, understand that Dan is a very good reporter who's very well sourced and understands completely what he means by that tweet whatsoever. Khalil Herbert's my running back 38. Again, I might be too high on him this week.
The toughest competition of the year is here. The biggest talents in men's rugby take the stage as 20 countries compete for 20 days of heart-pounding, hard-hitting action at the Rugby World Cup. Watch every match live on Peacock all the way through the final on October 28th, with games also available on CNBC.
I just think about the veteran guys that have invested time with me and they're investing time in myself. This is a dream come true for me to be here in the National Football League and try to make sure I live up to that standard every day. I just feel like I'm doing my job. When number 9 comes and throws the ball my way, it's my job to come down with it, and he always makes it super easy. So I think of the ones where some of the under routes in week 1, and we had some over the middle routes this week, plays where he's putting the ball in the right spot for me. I got to do a better job of being able to come down with it.
That was the rookie star of the first 2 weeks, Mr. Puka Nacua, Barry. What a start for this kid.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, I think he just needs a little bit more media training because, it would have been nice for him to say, I got to come down with it, but it's nice that Matthew Stafford believes in me the way that Matthew Berry did before anyone else. It was, just I appreciate the appreciate from Matthew Berry. NBC Sports,
you don't want him to forget where he came from?
Fantasy Football Happy Hour, FF Happy Hour. Hashtag,
He's very smiley. Very smiley.
He's a very smiley guy. Yeah, why wouldn't you be? If you're getting 15 targets a game,
exactly.
I'd be smiling too.
Lighting up the Niners defense.
Absolutely. Anyway, we love Puka. Puka does make the love list. We've loved him for a long time, at least before the season. I know I haven't brought that up a lot, but I just want to kind of
It's unbelievable. There's a discussion who's going to have a better week this week, Puka Nacua or Stephon Diggs.
It's a legit conversation.
Yeah, we're
it's
there.
insane.
It's unbelievable. 25
receptions through his first 2 NFL games. He leads all players with 35 targets. We've talked about this. He's got 10 more targets through 2 games than Justin Jefferson, who's number 2. It's not like they're ignoring Justin Jefferson. He's been targeted on 40% of his routes. 40%. No other Ram is above 18%. And you think about this Cincinnati Bengals defense that faced Baltimore last week. Ravens wide receivers caught 83% of their targets against the Bengals last week. So we should see success from Puka. Welcome to the top 10, Puka Nacua. I have you at number 9.
Our next one here, A.J. Brown, Jay. He's going up against Todd Bowles' defense with the Bucs. And listen, A.J. Brown coming off a week where he only had 29 yards, but we know Jalen Hurts might be looking to purposely get
the anti-Puka. He wasn't. A.J. Brown didn't give a smiley press conference at his locker after the game.
No, sir.
He also didn't get 15 targets.
This is also true.
Yeah, and look, the Vikings sold out to stop the pass to an almost comical degree, where at some point maybe changes up the strategy blind flowers if they're just running for 6 yards a carry every single single time. But I do think that they will be passing more against Tampa Bay. This line is only Bucks plus 4.5. If you asked me to guess the line before the season, I would have said like 8. But the fact that the Bucks have looked solid, the Eagles have looked a little bit jittery. They aren't the fully fledged machine they were last season, but I would suspect that they're going to go out of their way to get A.J. Brown right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Look, again, squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? All that narrative. But here's the other thing, right? They're also playing Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's a bottom 10 defense against the pass through 2 games, right? They're allowing over 15 yards per reception to wide receivers. That's 5th most in the NFL. They've given up on 100 receiving yards to a wide receiver in both games this season. And so to your point, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, who, by the way, are very close friends off the field. Like that was one of the reasons why Philadelphia went out and got him from Tennessee, was because of the close relationship between Hurts and Brown. And so you heard Hurts in the press conference. Hey, did you hear those things? And he's just like, yeah, man, AJ wants to compete. We're all trying. Like he was nonplussed, which was not a word I thought I was going to say today when I got here. But yes, that's right. Jalen Hurts was nonplussed. I agree that they're going to make an effort to get A.J. Brown the ball, not only to keep his buddy happy, but also because, by the way, he's really good, and it's a nice matchup. So I have him just inside my top 12 at number 11 this week.
Yep.
Earlier we discussed how Jerome Ford makes the hate list because Tennessee's run defense is phenomenal, but their pass defense does not follow that trend, Barry, which leads Amari Cooper making the love list.
Right. So, hopefully he wasn't 100% healthy in Monday night, and still in a game in which Deshaun Watson did not look good, still ended up producing and was solid. The Titans have allowed over 16 fantasy points to multiple wide receivers in both of their games so far this year. They've allowed the 2nd most receptions, the 3rd most yards to wide receivers through the first 2 weeks. We've talked about this. It is a pass funnel defense. You can't run to the Titans. You have to throw. And so Amari Cooper, who has a target share of 24.6% this year, that is the most on the Cleveland Browns. Their run game is in transition. Not a lot is working for Deshaun Watson, but throwing to Amari Cooper is part of it. I have him as a top 20 play in week number 3.
Yeah, and also in deeper leagues, wouldn't sleep on Elijah Moore, who's quietly had 16 targets the first 2 weeks, even in a run-heavy offense. It's probably going to have to pass more now with no Nick Chubb. And so, there's not much else there in the pass game because Lawrence's man Donovan Peoples-Jones hasn't set the world on fire thus far. It's Elijah Moore's the clear number 2 in that offense.
We haven't seen it's only been 2 games, but we also haven't seen David Njoku. I feel like this could be a nice David Njoku game.
Travis Etienne made the love list earlier from the Jaguars, and of course now Evan Engram does too. It's kind of that matchup with Houston, Jay, that everybody gets their eyes on, knows they can take advantage of. We've seen the big week from Calvin Ridley. We've seen, the bounce-back weeks from the rest of this group. But Evan Engram looking like the guy going into week 3.
Yep, Jags are 9-point favorites. The total is 44. And so a lot of that total is going to come from Jacksonville, we expect. And Evan Engram, it's been a strange start for the Jags offense. Doug Peterson was talking about how they're kind of almost already running out of excuses for why they aren't being better. And look, week 1, Kirk didn't get much usage. Then he gets a ton of usage. I still think they're finding their way. But this certainly is a dream matchup to get right, and Engram should benefit.
He's had at least 5 receptions in both games this season. He's actually, believe it or not, he is running the 2nd most routes on the team. Like you'd have thought it was after Ridley, it was probably Zay Jones, but actually Evan Engram is running the 2nd most routes. I love this matchup with Houston. To your point, Jay, right? The Colts have allowed the most yards after the catch for reception to tight ends through the first 2 weeks of the season. They gave up 80 yards and a touchdown to Colts tight ends, none of whom you feel like are anywhere close to Evan Engram. That's not an offense that is anywhere close to as good as the Jaguars are at this point of the season. So Engram comes in at tight end 6 for me this week. Yep. This should be a big game today.
How about some
this week,
others receiving votes here, led by Mike Williams, who gets to go up against that Minnesota defense. They've allowed 3 touchdowns to wide receivers through the first 2 weeks of the season. George Pickens, who had the big score from Kenny Pickett in week 2. He's got the Raiders. That's a good matchup for him. Jordan Addison against the Chargers. Tank Dell against Jacksonville. Jake Ferguson against the Cardinals. And then Barry Cade Otton against the Eagles.
I think Williams is due for a big game here. Almost a 26% target share so far. Vikings have allowed 3 touchdowns to wide receiver through those 2 games. Williams has an end zone target in each of the first 2 games. Just hasn't, really connected yet. I think that's coming. We talked about Pickens. Again, no Deontay Johnson. 35% target share on Sunday. Just unbelievable with the 10 targets. We expect a lot of scoring to be in Las Vegas against that Vegas defense that we don't have a ton of confidence in. Jordan Addison, look, Chargers have allowed 12 deep receptions through the first 2 games. And Jordan Addison, whose snap rate from week 1 to week 2 really, increased, and we saw it against Philadelphia, especially with obviously the run game in transition. I do believe in Jordan Addison. I think he's better than KJ Osborne right now, and I think the snaps and routes run will prove it starting this week. But either way, Addison comes in at like 36 for me. How about Tank Dell?
Your man.
My man, Tank Dell. 10 targets. 10 targets for him in week number 2. Played on 78% of the snaps, like it's trending in the right direction. They can't run the ball, again, as we talked about with Dameon Pierce here. And so going against Jacksonville, which we expect to be favored, the Jags, Tank Dell will be a thing, continue to be a thing. I like Tank Dell this week. I also like Nico Collins quite a bit as well. Could have put him on the list. Ferguson, K. Dotton, again, these are second-tier tight ends if you're outside the top 10. But it's worth noting that if I told you, name the tight end that leads all tight ends in red zone targets this year, you might guess Kelsey, you might guess Mark Andrews. It's actually Jake Ferguson, of all people. 63% of his targets come in the red zone. Cardinals allow the third most yards to tight ends through 2 weeks. And Cade Otton, 50 yards and a touchdown have been allowed to opposing tight ends, but both games this season by Philadelphia. Like they rush, they play back. Philadelphia has always been poor against tight ends. Start your tight ends against Philadelphia is kind of a standard rule. They've allowed the most receptions to tight ends through 2 weeks. So Cade Otton, who's sort of a thing, like it's kind of Baker's been better than expected. Listen, I'm just inside my top 20, but he's also available in every single league.
Yep. Couple things on this. So on George Pickens, he's clearly the beneficiary of Deontay Johnson going down. I think people thought that maybe Allen Robinson would rise up. It's really Calvin Austin. He's getting the snaps on the outside, so in deeper leagues, don't mind Calvin Austin. And then after that, I think a big kind of fantasy relevant happening from last week was that CJ Stroud showed that he could support multiple wide receivers, even with what's happening with that offensive line. So Nico Collins and Tank Dell, they're the two guys there over Robert Woods. And then with Jake Ferguson, I think the fact that Dalton Schultz has been so bad so far in Houston kind of makes me feel better about Jake Ferguson, that just Dak seems to really like looking for his tight end. And so Jake Ferguson's going to have some 2-touchdown games this year, and he's going to win people some weeks. So he is a guy who should not be on waivers.
Let's jump into the hate list from pass catchers, Jay. DeAndre Hopkins has been dealing with a little bit of injury throughout this season. Now he sees the Browns secondary. He's going to go up against a good player in Denzel Ward. DeAndre Hopkins highlights our hate list.
Yeah, and I think this has gone a little bit under the radar too because of the Nick Chubb injury and how bad Deshaun Watson has looked. But Cleveland have a top 4 defense in the league right now. They kept the Bengals to 3 points in week 1. I understand Burrow wasn't right, but they still put up 24 against the Ravens. And then you look at just the Steelers scoring 26 points. Well, they scored 2 defensive touchdowns, and then there was one breakdown for a 70-yard George Pickens touchdown. This defense is an absolute monster in Cleveland. If DeAndre Hopkins, who is kind of nursing injuries as well, it doesn't seem like a great spot for him.
The Denzel, he's one of my favorite players in the NFL, but have him outside my top 20. Actually, I'm at 25 in my ranks as of today. To your point about the Browns defense, right? Browns are allowing a 41% catch rate to opposing wide receivers. That is second best in the NFL so far this year. The only wide receiver to have more than 40 yards against Cleveland this year is George Pickens. And again, it was all basically on one play where he made an unbelievable play. But again, think about who the Browns have faced, right? So yes, George Pickens, but not Jamar Chase, not T. Higgins. It's a really good defense. And so Hopkins, who played under 60% of the snaps last week, he was questionable with that ankle injury, doesn't feel like he's 100% healthy. He's, again, he's just merely wide receiver 25. It's been an up and down season so far for Ryan Tannehill as well.
Yep.
Our next one, Barry, Hollywood Brown going up against the Cowboys. The Cowboys defense just kind of a murderer's row for anyone to run into.
That's really what it is. I can give you stats. I got stats as to how good Dallas is. Again, they allow the lowest catch rate in the NFL to wide receivers so far this year, under 40%. Garrett Wilson, the only wide receiver to have more than 25 yards against Dallas so far this year.
Yeah,
right. And again, it was one play. Right. It was a missed tackle. And he's Garrett Wilson.
Yep.
Right. And so they're the only team that hasn't allowed a completion of 15-plus air yards this season. Again, the Garrett Wilson play was all after the catch as well. And so, we like Josh Dobbs. We're rooting for Josh Dobbs. But it's Dallas. I think he's going to be under pressure. You talked about the other day, Jay, about how Micah Parsons should be the favorite for defensive MVP, right? And Josh Dobbs is going to be running for his life, and so I think it's going to be a lot of dump offs to James Conner and Zach Ertz in this game. Maybe some bubble screens to Marquise Brown, but hard to see him getting into the end zone. He's wide receiver 37 for me this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 weeks in, and they haven't faced much, but this Dallas defense might be kind of historic. Like, that's what it looks like so far. Micah Parsons is terrifying. The whole defense is terrifying. And Josh Dobbs and the Arizona offense, probably not the team to break it down.
Our last one here, Jay, Kyle Pitts going up against the Lions. And you would think the matchup, there could be something there, but I think we're reaching the reality that Kyle Pitts is not a consistent player in fantasy, especially not in the red zone.
Desmond Ridder looked terrible against Green Bay. He looked absolutely terrible. I suspect that it would be probably a favorite at this point that we see Taylor Heineke take over as the starter at some point during the season. This is Bijan Robinson's offense, and there's not going to be much for him to eat for the pass catches.
There's not enough volume in this offense to support 3 fantasy-relevant pass catchers, and at the moment it appears that the pecking order is Bijan, Drake London, and then Kyle Pitts. He's played 29 career games. He's scored 3 touchdowns. He has single-digit fantasy points in 66% of his career games. He is unstartable at the moment until we see something. I don't love the matchup at Detroit. He's my tight end 13. You're always hoping. Like, Jonnu Smith is getting more targets than him. I don't understand it, but I don't know. To me, he's unstartable until you see it.
Yep.
Finally, the quarterbacks, of course, and we lead with the man who had plenty to say about the Dolphins' offense, shutting up a lot of the doubters. Let's hear from him.
There's been a lot of naysayers, and I know our guys in the O-line room hear what everyone's saying as well. So that's a way that they're able to shut the haters up, basically. Having Tyreek and Waddle, having fast guys also help me get the ball out quicker to be able to distribute that and throw off timing for the rushers as well. So I think that's been a big key to that as well.
Loa, who leads the love list this week, and Jay, he's got Denver this week where, listen, yeah, they have Patrick Surtain, who's a great player, but nothing seems to be stopping Mike McDaniel's offense.
No, and Matthew's man Sam Howell did whatever he wanted against the Denver defense, and now the Washington offense is good. It's been good, but this is, to your point earlier, Matthew, this is a different class, and Tua right now, joint MVP favorite with Patrick Mahomes. His passing yards prop on DraftKings is only 264.5. I think he goes over that and has a big game against the Broncos.
Yeah, I like that bet as well. Roll Tide, Tua Tagovailoa, of course.
Now an accurate
went from
Roll
Alabama.
Tide.
There you go, Roll Tide. Through 2 weeks, the Broncos are allowing passing touchdowns at the 5th highest rate. Through 2 games, Denver's allowing at the 4th highest passer rating. They rank 30th in pressure rate this season. Tua's going to have a clean pocket. And, oh, by the way, this is a West Coast team traveling east for a 1 o'clock game in the hot Miami Heat in September against, I think, the hottest offense in the NFL.
Yep.
I have Tua at 6. I mean, yeah. You should, and he'd be higher if it wasn't for the fact that, like, at the moment, Waddle's in the concussion protocol, Tyreek Hill is dealing with an ankle.
Yep.
Like, if you knew both were healthy and playing the full game, be even higher.
I think it's instructive and a great sign that Tyreek Hill was kind of shut down against the Patriots. Didn't matter. Tua was still in complete control. Didn't have the most amazing stats, but he was better than his stats were in that game.
Yeah.
And Teron Armstead making his way back soon, too.
Yep, which is big.
That's a big one. So our next passer here on the love list, Kirk Cousins going up against the Chargers defense. And for Barry, this week he comes in as QB7 for you.
Yeah. So Kirk Cousins was on the hate list last week, and that was a mistake. I've learned my lesson. So welcome. And you're welcome for everyone that has Kirk Cousins. I sort of reverse jinxed it. I got him out, got him up and above. So, that's what it is. Like, just, you're welcome, America. You're welcome. I motivated Kirk Cousins. Look, it's a great, it's a really positive game script between the Chargers and the Vikings. 2 very good offenses, 2 not so good defenses. 54.5, it's the over-under. It's the highest on the Week 3 slate as well. No team in the NFL has a higher passing rate. 79% for the Minnesota Vikings through the first 2 weeks of the season. 40 or more pass attempts and 340 passing yards both games so far this year. Chargers allowing over 10 yards per pass attempt. Cousins is my number 7 quarterback this week.
Yep.
I'm just going to be throwing early and often against this one.
Kirk Cousins is the current favorite on DraftKings to lead the league in passing yards, and you can see why.
I mean, the Chargers gave up 21 fantasy points in week 1 to Tua. Okay, fine. Tua is awesome. They also gave up 21 fantasy points to Ryan Tannehill last week. Yeah, give me Kirk Cousins this week.
The next one here, we get to see him on Thursday Night Football. Brock Purdy going up against Wink Martindale's New York Giants offense. And listen, guys, The Giants, Jay, they've been able to get no pressure on the quarterback this year, and they're going up against an offense that under Kyle Shanahan feels like all things are clicking.
It's not just that they don't get any pressure, it's that Wink Martindale blitzes a lot. That's what, so you're blitzing
That's
without pressure against Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and potentially Brandon Ayuk. This seems like a recipe for disaster.
Or McCaffrey out of the backfield, too, by the way. Just a quick dump off, bring the pressure in. Boop.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think Brock Purdy, who quietly, he was on his way to a massive passing day against the Steelers in week 1, and then he just didn't have to throw in the last quarter. But he could have had 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. We're going to see Brock Purdy throw, I think, more than we did last year.
Yeah, and that's the only concern is if the Giants aren't competitive and do they need to do this. But look, he's played 3 home games in his career, and he's averaging over 19 fantasy points per game. He had multiple passing touchdowns in all 3 games. Since the start of last year, the Giants bottom 10 in the NFL in terms of most yards after the catch allowed per reception. So again, think about Deebo, Aiyuk, Kittle, CMC, also good after the catch. Make no mistake, Kyle Shanahan will take advantage of that. I'm at QB 11.
How about some others receiving votes? Russell Wilson, Kenny Pickett, not the 2 you'd expect, and then Matthew Stafford, who's been absolutely great this season.
In the 4 games since Nathaniel Hackett was fired, Russell Wilson is averaging 22 fantasy points per game. Now, obviously, his stats so far this year inflated by the Hail Mary last week, which is fluky, but the 2 things that are positive, again, high over-under at Miami. We expect them to be trailing. He's going to have to be throwing. And he had 56 rushing yards last week, which is all of a sudden, if Russ is going to start running, that's actually interesting as well. I am at QB 13. I do think Kenny Pickett gets up to Schneid at Las Vegas. Through 2 weeks, Vegas allowing passing touchdowns at the 2nd highest rate. So, and the Steelers' defense has been brutal. And then Matthew Stafford. Again, we've talked about him. That's who Puka Nacua is getting balls from here. 93 pass attempts through 2 games, over 300 passing yards in both. He's played unbelievable. Through 2 weeks, the Bengals have the 4th lowest pressure rate. We've always talked about that. When Matthew Stafford has time, he's deadly. And right now he's getting time. I expect him to have time on Monday night against Cincy.
Yep, he's a very viable starting quarterback option until further notice, just because of the volume and also just his skill level at the moment. Looks like he was in 2021. I'm not with you on Kenny Pickett. I need to see something from Kenny Pickett. He's been terrible the first 2 weeks, but
I'm at QB 17.
Yeah, I mean, it can't get any worse.
Others receiving votes. It's a matchup based, and I still believe in the talent. Again, Cleveland and San Francisco are 2 really tough games to start the year off of. It'll be better on the road at Las Vegas.
Yep.
All right, starting the hate list off here, and listen, we know all the off-the-field stuff that Justin Fields has been in the news for this week because of the press conference regarding the coaches, but Justin Fields makes the hate list here, Barry, because quite frankly, he hasn't been good in fantasy this year, and now he goes up against the Chiefs defense where Chris Jones is back, and he wrecked the game last week.
He really did, and so one of 2 things happens here. Either I'm dead right, I put Justin Fields on the hate list, right? And I'm right about that. And he, once again, has another brutal game. He's had under 15 fantasy points in both games this season. Or he does what Kirk Cousins did last week, and he sees the column, and he gets all motivated. He's like, I'm going to shut Barry up because I'm sure they all read the column. And anyway, but whatever. But he's running for his life against Chris Jones, and then all of a sudden he starts running, and I have helped break the schneid. I have and so I look like a moron because he was on the hate list and he goes off, but there you go. We'd be back. We'd finally be back. As somebody who has a decent amount of Justin Fields, I'm willing to take that hit if it gets us the Justin Fields that we drafted. 3 rushing yards last week. He's only had 4 rushing attempts. That's the crazy part here. And so it's just, we don't know if all the drama spills out of the field or if it's one of those things that's like all the drama is, it's like, okay, now he goes off. To me, there's no in between. He's either going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback or once again, he's going to be brutal this week.
Yep.
And I put him on the hate list because I think he's going to be brutal against a Chiefs defense that allows passing touchdowns at the lowest rate through 2 weeks.
Good to see Barry playing 8-dimensional chess once again with
As always.
Justin Fields. Look, I don't know what's going to happen in this game. I don't know what the result will be, but I'm pretty confident that Justin Fields is going to run more than he has in the past after that press conference, which is a little bit overblown, but I'm pretty sure he's going to run more than he has.
Speaking of a man, Jay, that might be running for his life tonight, Daniel Jones against the 49ers. Listen, a brutal week 1 for Daniel Jones against the Cowboys, a brutal start to week 2, monster second half against Arizona. Now he gets the short week against San Francisco, at San Francisco.
Yeah, if only we had a previous example of Daniel Jones in prime time this season against an elite defense, and how did that go against the Cowboys in week 1? I think it's going to be a rough night for Daniel Jones.
Yeah, no Saquon Barkley as well, so their offense becomes somewhat one-dimensional. Since the start of last year, only 3 quarterbacks have scored 18 or more fantasy points against San Francisco. So, yeah, maybe he gets you 15 or 16 because of the rushing, but it's hard to see him having an elite game as well. 4th lowest implied team total this week for the Giants as well. So we're not expecting them to put up a bunch of points against the Niners, who are 4th in pressure rate through 2 weeks. They get after the quarterback. So maybe that leads to some rushing, but it also means probably Daniel Jones throwing a pick, outside my top 15. He's merely a desperation QB2 play this week.
All right, we're taking our last break, but when we're back, more on Thursday Night Football. It's last call. We're giving you our best props for the game tonight. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code BERRY when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. All right, guys, let's take a look at Thursday Night Football's most bet player props, courtesy of our friends at DraftKings. Number 1 is Christian McCaffrey's rushing yards over 77.5. They're taking a page out of your playbook from last week, Jay. Nick Bosa, total sacks over. He basically just needs half a sack to hit that. So Nick Bosa, that's a minus 160. Daniel Jones rushing yards is over 37.5. Jake Moody, extra point made, over 2.5. And Christian McCaffrey, longest rush over 17.5. Jay, anything on this board you like, or is your best bet off this board?
I do like Nick Bosa over 0.25 sacks. His pressure rate, pass rush win rate, it's all the same as last year. He's just not getting home. That's fluky. He's going to get sacks more sooner or later. 2 bets that I'll give you. Brock Purdy, longest completion, over 35.5 yards. The Giants, they blitz a lot. They don't get pressure much. That is a recipe for disaster against the Niners. Purdy has been elite against blitzing defenses when they don't get home. And also, to your point earlier, the Giants, not good in terms of yak. And that's not the offense to not be good against in San Francisco.
If he throws a 2-yard pass to Christian McCaffrey and then Christian McCaffrey runs 37
that
yards,
counts all the same.
That bet cashes.
And then last one, if you want to get a little spicy, Deebo Samuel, 100-plus receiving yards is plus 600 on DraftKings. 75-plus is plus 235.
Wow, especially, by the way, when you consider the fact that Brandon Aiyuk may not be 100% as well. We haven't seen that big blow-up Deebo game yet, so I could see that.
Yep.
Spicy best bets should be an alternate segment.
I do like spicy best
Listen,
bets.
I'm keeping this simple. Brock Purdy, total passing touchdowns over 1.5. That's only at minus 120. I think Brock Purdy gets his 2 passing touchdowns tonight.
He seems to do it every week. I got a couple of them real quick for you. Daniel Jones, over 7.5 rushing attempts. Like, he's had 9 or more rushing attempts in both games this season. No Saquon Barkley. Nick Bosa chasing after him. So I think he will have over 7.5 rushing attempts. I like Daniel Jones to throw a pick as well. Like, normally a pretty protective guy, but on the road on a short week, again, without Barkley in that backfield, he's got 3 interceptions through his first 2 games this season. That's only minus 120 last time I checked. And just kind of a weird one here, but how about Paris Campbell, under 28.5 receiving yards through the 2 games? He has 23 receiving yards. He hasn't been used a lot. Wan'Dale Robinson might be back today as well. They're actually pretty good against the slot. So, yeah, 28.5 struck me as high for Paris Campbell in this game. I guess people are expecting them to throw a lot. But, yeah, with Wan'Dale potentially back, give me the under on 28.5 receiving yards for Paris Campbell, who has yet to hit that number as a Giant.
Yeah, and last one, if this game starts getting out of hand early, live bet the over on Elijah Mitchell rushing yards, because I think Elijah Mitchell's going to see some work in the second half if it's a blowout.
Especially because, by the way, it's a short week. I actually like the under on the Christian McCaffrey rushing yards because, again, you'll see more Mitchell and they'll probably rest him in the second half.
From the public.
It's closing time, which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, Connor Rogers. For Jay Crouch and the Magpies, I am Matthew Berry. Good luck tonight. Place your bets. We'll see you tomorrow. Go read, love, hate. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.